Sometime during humanity's early history, the most dangerous weapon in the Stone Age didn't cut skin. It destroyed the strongest man in the tribe. Let's call her Ashai because no one wrote her name down. But someone very much like her lived this exact story in early human bands across the world. It started at the river. Washing hides with two other women, she described what she'd seen on the last hunt. How the hunt leader let a wounded elder fall behind on the trail rather than slow down for him. How he'd taken the best cut of meat before the children had eaten. How he'd smiled while he did it, certain no one would ever say a word. She only whispered it once, but watch what happens next. One woman repeats it while scraping a hide clean. A man sharpening a spear nearby overhears and mentions it that evening to his brother. By the time the fire is lit, 3 separate conversations are already carrying the same story in 3 different directions. By sunset the next day, the children know. Nobody shouted anything. Nobody had to. Oddly enough, anthropologists still watch this exact thing happen today, in living hunter-gatherer bands. We'll come back to that. For now, Ashai tries to convince herself nothing will happen. Maybe the women forgot. Maybe nobody believed them. Then she notices the space beside her at the fire stays empty a half-second longer than it used to. Nobody accuses her of lying. Nobody defends her either. The tribe is doing something else entirely. That sounds unbelievably petty, doesn't it? Adults whispering behind each other's backs. It sounds like the opposite of civilization. Gossip, cliques, rumor. The kind of thing we're taught to rise above. If you'd asked an ancient hunter what weapon protected his children, you'd expect him to point at his spear. He'd have been wrong. A spear could wound your body. A reputation could convince everyone else to stop saving it. Early human groups were small, 20, maybe 50 people, entirely dependent on each other. In a group that size, one selfish hoarder, one quiet bully, could bleed the whole tribe dry for years. Because you can rarely catch him in the act more than once. But you don't need to catch him twice. You only need one person to see it once and tell 2 others. Watch it happen. One bull moves a little further from the hunt leaders, then another. Nobody says why. He notices. He smiles, expecting the joke to pass. He looks around. Nobody meets his eyes. Now try a thought experiment. You're sleeping, and one eye opens. Someone is quietly stealing dried meat from beneath the furs across the fire. You're not certain. It's dark. So you say nothing. The next morning, someone else mentions, almost in passing, that they noticed the same thing last week. Suddenly, 2 small, uncertain observations have become one very dangerous reputation. Neither of you needed to be sure. You only needed to talk to each other. Here's the strange part. Nobody voted on this. No one held a meeting or organized anything. And yet somehow, without a single conversation between most of them, the entire tribe arrived at the same conclusion at almost the same time. Humans had accidentally invented something stranger than government, a system that could control behavior without a king, without police, without a single prison, using nothing but what people said about each other when no one important was listening. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, though. The hunt leader genuinely believes he earned that meat. In his mind, he's not a villain. He's a man who works harder than anyone else and finally gets what he deserves. Gossip doesn't care about his side of the story. It never has. And that cuts both ways. What if Ashai had been wrong? What if she'd misjudged what she saw at the river, or exaggerated it slightly in the retelling, the way stories do? The same system that quietly punished a genuine hoarder could just as easily destroy an innocent person, with no trial, no appeal, no way to correct the record once it started moving. That's also why gossip doesn't feel like work. To your brain, it's survival information, which is exactly why it's so hard to resist. Every brain in the tribe was quietly keeping score. One morning, the hunt leader's sleeping place is empty. He's simply gone, walked out toward a horizon that offers him nothing. No fight, no blood. The weapon never made a sound. It never needed to. Anthropologists have documented versions of this exact pattern across multiple modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania. None of them are a perfect window into the deep past, but they offer one of the closest living comparisons we have. Bullies and freeloaders aren't beaten into submission. They're talked about, quietly and repeatedly, until cooperation becomes their only remaining option, or exile becomes their only future. Exile in that world was close to a death sentence, Alone on the open plains, without the tribe's eyes watching for predators in the dark, a human did not survive long. So when a tribe stopped speaking to someone, stopped saving them a place by the fire, they weren't being petty. They are pronouncing a verdict. This tiny invention didn't stay inside one camp. It traveled with every migration, carried inside the heads of people who never stopped needing to know who could be trusted. From empires to companies, from religions to school playgrounds, all of them still depend on the same invisible machinery first tested by a handful of people around a fire, judging a man by nothing but what was said about him. Long before humans invented governments, they invented the fear of being talked about. The next time you feel that specific unease, wondering what people are saying about you after you leave the room, your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's remembering a world where that whisper really could decide whether you survived the winter. So, which would you rather lose, your spear or your reputation? Somewhere inside your brain, a fire is still burning. Around it sit 50 people, deciding, quietly, whether to save you a place.